right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, fellow Pandemonium travelers. This is Seattle Pandemonium Shutdown Day 119 by my count. And yeah, so the chop is over as far as I could tell. People are still kind of throwing things at the cops and stuff, but I think they've kept the place emptied out for the most part. In other news, you had, what I see the headline anyway, Patty Murray, our senator here, one of our senators, I guess, here in Washington, signed on to call it a demilitarize the police bill. It's supposed to stop the transfer of military equipment and weapons and things to law enforcement. And I mean, this is one of the things that people have been talking about in terms of police reform, is getting them dressed up like RoboCop and giving them tanks and making it a war footing against the population. The sort of warrior cop thing leads to that form of policing, right? And this might be a good thing. I mean, I feel like we should consider this, try it out, but if we find that we are, if it's ultimately less safe for the officers and for the public, right, then we need to bring some of this stuff back. I don't know, drones and helicopters. Are we going to take helicopters? Those are technically like a military thing, right? But they use them for search and rescue. I don't know. You make exceptions for all these things. Do they need MRAPs and all these literally tanks and APCs and things? Do they need them? I don't know. I mean, we arrived here for a reason, like with all of this intense level of equipment and everything that that officers seem to have. So we need to, I want to say, do it somewhat scientifically. We need to be scientific about the actual rollout, what actually is going to happen. And again, with other reforms like changes in funding, let's not say defunding, but let's say some aspect of police funding is going to be changed, is the idea, right? Will public safety improve? Will it not? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. So, another thing I wanted to talk about, and this is, again, everyone is beating a dead horse about, statues and removing old statues and, statues of the Confederacy and all that stuff. I can understand removing them. I get it. But it is public property, and you shouldn't just tear it down. You shouldn't just tear it down. You should put it to a vote through the city and have it changed in a democratic fashion. That's how those things are supposed to happen. And that conversation that occurs that convinces people that yes, in fact, they should be removed, that's the conversation that people need to be having. Not just my Confederacy or my heritage but my racism. Like, you got to talk to each other and figure out how to make this work. And you know what? I feel like a lot of other countries around the world don't have this problem. They don't. They don't have these problems because they have more homogenous societies. They didn't have the same they don't have the same history. So they don't have these problems. So this is a uniquely American problem. Maybe not completely uniquely, but in our specific context, we have to figure out how to do this, right? We have to figure out how to diversity. And I've said before, we're not very good at it. So I wanted to address this iconoclasm of the current moment. So today, I was seeing posts from, seems some journalist or some academic in the UK talking about removing Darwin statues because Darwin, in his era, the mid-1800s, I guess, believed in different races of people, as everyone did at the time, as many still do now. And he wrote about races in Origin of Species But in terms of like in terms of different races of creatures, like, it's my understanding, I mean, maybe it's apologia, but it's like he was talking about different races of creatures surviving by adapting and evolving with their environment. Not necessarily, and the superior races of creatures, not races as in human subgroups. Does that make sense? So that might be apologia, but I remember reading that and reading his actual, words in context and being like, oh no, he just means some species survive and other species don't. Anyways, there's an issue here with this iconoclasm of like, let's go tear down the Darwin statue because eugenics comes from evolutionary theory, or an interpretation of evolutionary theory, and so all that stuff is all Darwin's fault. And it's like, well, in reality, this is the thing. Darwin wasn't some kind of white supremacist, okay? He even is quoted as intervening in Brazil when an owner of a young slave boy was hitting the slave with a whip, and he intervened to stop it. And he described how the relationship between the masters and their slaves was grotesque and needed to change. So if anything, he was an abolitionist, okay? So people need to... So, again, if the Democrats are liberals, and they claim to be the party of science, and again, this was in the UK, but it's the same thing, same kind of concept happening here. They actually tore down a statue of an abolitionist in Madison, right? Because they don't know the context, they don't know the history. They just see a statue of like an old white guy and they tear it down, not understanding why it was put up in the first place. Now I understand it's not the same thing as Jefferson Davis, right? But if you want to take the advancement, you want to take the science, you want to be the party of science, then you can't take Charles Darwin and the evolution by natural selection theory and take that and then abandon the guy because he lived in a time that was not as progressive as ours. Do you understand? Like, whoever invented the wheel probably did something to get canceled at some point, right? So how about the pyramids? Are you gonna tear down the pyramids because the pharaohs, I don't know, they kept slaves and they, it was the patriarchy? Like, at some point, your iconoclasm has to, one, produce a result that is a positive outcome. I mean, right now it just seems like kind of making people mad. They want to tear down a statue of Andrew Jackson. I understand that he was an Indian killer. He was not friendly to the native population, the indigenous population, I suppose. Okay, but he was also a president of the United States, and it's just we want to take the advancements, but if we find out anything bad about the person, then we want to again jettison them, but keep all the work that they did. And that is, I feel like that's short-sighted, because, and here, this is the thing about like the story of history, is a story of people taking risks in the moment, in their era, to discover more about the world, discover maybe moral or ethical, philosophical truths that we then apply, like abolition, for example, very unpopular until kind of like 10 minutes ago in terms of human history. Like, it's still going on in parts of the world, and there's still sex trafficking and all that stuff, but I mean, literally just, I can capture you and now I own you. Like, that's not a part of our paradigm now, right? In a not too long ago, that was considered normal, okay? So again, for people to talk about race, like someone who is relatively progressive even, like Teddy Roosevelt, would talk about like the American Negro. Now, that was just the language they used at the time, right? So if you find that offensive, well then, my God, history is a litany of horrors that will give you nightmares if you actually look into how horrific humans have been to each other. So the way we're treating each other now is genteel and kind, even when we're like fighting in the streets. No one is. Have you seen Gangs of New York? Like, we could be way more savage to each other. Okay, we're actually surprisingly civil for the moment. But in this frenzy of iconoclasm, I just want everyone to stop for a second and consider what it is that you're destroying and why, and if you are not being short-sighted about what it is you're trying to do, especially if it's something like a Charles Darwin statue. Don't just get mad about one aspect of this person. Understand why the statue was erected in the first place and why this person was liked. Now, again, if that's removing a statue of General Bedford Forrest, then I'd say fine, you can take that one down, I think. I mean, did he create the KKK? It's like, take that one down and put it in a museum, or put a hell of a plaque on that thing and tell the truth about the guy, right? So, and again, someone put up an Epstein statue. It was in like, where was it? Albuquerque. Someone put up a bronze, or a bronze, I guess, statue of Jeffrey Epstein. He rose to prominence and became a huge, successful financier, and died in prison because he was also a rapist. And it's like, there's the statue of the guy. He was part of the New Mexico area because he owned a ranch there or whatever. But he was also a rapist who died in prison. Tell the story, you know? Explain how who he is being represented as is accurate, true, and useful, right? Anyways, well, that's Friday. I don't know if I'll film anything tomorrow. Probably won't. Happy 4th of July, everyone. Bye.